Hey y'all, I'm Heather with Underwater Panther. On this channel, I talk about the intersection of psychology, moral cognition, power dynamics, and how men and women actually behave under pressure. Not how we wish they would behave, and not how they present when things are comfortable. This series is not about labeling men or women as toxic, and it's not about personality traits or surface level gender debates. What I'm examining here is what happens to responsibility, authority, care, and ethics when systems weaken and life gets harder. Because when reality tightens, people don't rise into their ideals, they fall into their defaults. Most conversations about men and women stay focused on communication styles, attraction, aesthetics, or roles. But those conversations miss the real issue, which is where the pressure goes when resources shrink, consequences increase, and accountability becomes unavoidable. So, the questions I'm asking in this series are very simple but very uncomfortable. Who actually carries responsibility when things go wrong? Who absorbs the consequences quietly? Who redirects pressure onto someone else? And who avoids it altogether while still benefiting? This is where moral cognition comes in. How men and women decide what is justified, acceptable, or good enough when the stakes rise. And this is where identity starts to split. When people confuse being socially rewarded, excused, or protected with being structurally responsible. In stable times, performance can pass as maturity. In unstable times, only people who are load bearing hold. What I want is clarity, not blame. Because until you understand how you behave under stress, you'll keep mistaking compliance for care, intensity for strength, avoidance for autonomy, and survival strategies for character. This work is now not about being better than anyone else. It's about being honest about how men and women are being shaped by collapsing systems and what that means for relationships, families, and the next generation. That is what we are getting into. So, firstly, I want to do a little sales promo. Someone asked me to write a book, and I've written many books in my life, and normally it is for people who I know in person dealing with birth charts, their children, their relationships, their personality. This is the first book that someone asked me to write that I don't know who they are personally. So someone online commented wanting me to write the book from a video I did. And so my very first book that I've written for someone outside of my actual life is about the download topic. Is that not comical? It's been my life dream to write books. I have been doing it for many years, but I have wanted to write books my entire life. And so I am more excited than you will ever know. And appreciative, deeply, deeply appreciative. All right, so down low in the double lives, down low shadow. This book exists because one of you asked for it. After so many comments saying something feels off, but I can't name it, I finally sat down and wrote the framework behind those experiences, not as blame, but not as exposure, but as clarity. So this book looks at split identity, sexual secrecy, and double lives, while they're increasing now and how they destabilize relationships and why women feel the harm before they can prove anything. It's not about orientation, it's about coherence versus deception and the real cost of living two lives. So there is 23 pages of free preview, 23 pages. You can find that under buy now. You click on preview and you can download that for free. So you can look at the table of contents. You can get some of the basic definitions and what else did I put on there? I might have exited. I've got like 30,000 things open on my computer. So yeah, I did exit. Here, hold on, give me a second. There it is. I saved it on my screen. Let me open it real quick so I can see exactly what the free preview has on it, if it will open. Excuse me. All right, it is taking forever. I think it's like still 0 degrees here in Indiana. All of a sudden, my throat's getting itchy. Okay, here it is. It pulled up finally. All right, 23 pages. So you get the book cover, a thank you letter at the beginning, excuse me, table of contents. So I wanted you to be able to see what you're getting yourself into. Okay, so yeah, I give you basic definitions, the 9 institutional containers and how their collapse produces split identity and down low behavior. So it's extremely important to understand what has gone on generationally in our society through the 9 institutional containers that have collapsed. So I do break that down for free. So we're talking meaning and religion, education, family, economy, governance and law, community, belonging, masculine initiation, feminine containment, and rites of passage. So I break those down. And what else did I give you for free? What down low actually means, structural definition, the split self, how double lives form, why it's coming to light now, why sex becomes the most common shadow arena, the core mechanism, shame and performance equals split self, the masculinity collapse layer, why this is so widespread, and also about myself, about the author portion. I put that at the end. All right, so that is, I think that's enough of that. I also go through the 5 stages of double life escalation: performance, compartmentalization, escalation, exposure, and rebuild or repeat. All right, so that's enough of that. I feel satisfied. Someone asked me 5 days ago, and I finally have that uploaded. Very satisfied with it, and wanted to let y'all know. I am currently trying to upload a 2-hour video on YouTube. I expanded out the down low topic. And so that is why I am working on this series right now. I've got like 20 different series going on right now. I've been heavily dumping into the moral cognition series, the generational series, Scorpio series. I get heavily into Astro-Psychology. So anyways, now we are working on this series. All right, so before I talk about men, women, actually, let me tell you what series this is. I do have multiple playlists organized in order. My internet is super slow. It's probably not going to pull up. Anyways, I'll put it in the link in the description box below. All right, so before I talk about, oh, there it goes finally. All right, so this series is called Cultural Shadow, Power and Polarity, Masculine and Feminine, Identity and Psychological Integration. So this series examines how unresolved cultural shadow expresses itself through distorted masculinity, distorted femininity, and polarized identity roles, especially in relationships, power structures, and modern social dynamics. So that is what is going on right now. I do apologize. Before I talk about men, women, and relationships or responsibility, I need to say where I'm standing in this conversation. I'm not speaking from theory, I'm not speaking from ideology, and I'm not speaking from resentment. I'm speaking as someone who internalized responsibility early, not because I wanted to be noble, but because reality didn't offer me an opt-out. When something depended on me, I acted, not because I controlled the outcome, not because I was guaranteed appreciation, not because the cost of not acting would land on someone more vulnerable than me. That's how my nervous system learned adulthood. So I am a Capricorn ISTJ stellium, my moon, my Neptune, my Uranus, my midheaven. I'm an Aquarian, Mercury, INTJ, Mercury, thinking and communication, Pisces, Sun, Venus, and North Node. So as you can imagine, I'm a very, very load bearing when it comes to responsibility. I feel a very heavy moral obligation every single minute of every single day. So when I look at modern relationships, modern fatherhood, and modern masculinity, what confuses me isn't that things are hard. Life has always been hard. What confuses me is how often responsibility is negotiated, minimized, delayed, or reframed as unfair, even when the consequences are obvious and the capacity exists. I don't recognize responsibility as leverage. I don't recognize care as conditional. And I don't understand needing to feel powerful or needed in order to show up. So, what you're about to hear is not an attack, it's an explanation. Because once you understand what's actually happening, the pattern becomes impossible to unsee. So, there's a moment a lot of women hit where confusion turns into alarm. You're not emotional, you're not bitter, you're not misreading men. You're watching grown men call the bare minimum duty, and something in your nervous system is screaming that this math doesn't work anymore. So I've been circling around this topic. How long has it been? 2 years. I've been circling around this topic for 2 years because longer than that, actually. I don't talk on a topic until I'm already a year or two deep into it normally, like 95% of the time. So I take a long time to research, understand it in real life, and I sit on it for a long time to process it and try to understand it. This is very frustrating, and it's just very frustrating. So this topic came about for me. I don't like to get personal, but I have to use this example because it's going to come up multiple times during this video. And this is like the main trigger recently, I should say. Obviously, not obviously, but I've had prior triggers that I was like, what the hell? So the most recent trigger I had was a man paying $40 a week towards their child, 3. I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but a man paying $40 a week for one child and using it as moral status doesn't feel just insufficient. It feels detached from reality. So this is a huge trigger for me. I absolutely care so freaking deeply for children. I can see structurally what is happening. This topic is just like outrageous to me. I do not operate like this, and it is something that I keep bumping up against. I've been in 2 relationships the last 10 years. How long has it been? 7, 8, 9, 10. Over 10 years. I've been in 2 relationships in the last 10 years. And it has been an issue in both of those relationships for me personally, but it's not just me personally because I do talk to a lot of people. I know many people, and this just keeps coming up again and again. I'm not saying all men are like this. It has become more notorious recently in the last 20 years. The men in my family are amazing. Like, I was not raised this way. And so, yeah, let's talk about it. So, and the reason it feels that way, let's see, where was I? Okay, it's because the system that taught men what responsibility means quietly broke and no one replaced it. All right. It's a question of how responsibility was downgraded, legalized, and shrink wrapped into something that protects male identity while transferring the real cost to women and children. Once you see that shift clearly, the behavior stops looking insane. So it starts looking inevitable. So I just don't understand. It's really hard for me to understand how men think. We are completely different creatures. We operate completely differently. They are very extractive, and women are extremely relational and caregiving. And so it's really hard for me to sit here without getting extremely frustrated to try to I am really freaking good at understanding different perspectives. I mean, that's like literally what I'm doing on this channel. I've broken down all of the 12 astro-psychological personality types. I put my feet in all of their shoes. I'm really good at seeing patterns and understanding personalities. But when it comes to men and women, it's rough. It's very rough. So let's break it down. First, I'm going to start with the history because that's important. How did we get here? What was it like prior? We're talking about responsibility, men being responsible, and the lack thereof today. So when did this change and why it feels so insane now? So on the surface, it does look irrational and delusional for a man to pay $40 a week in child support and sincerely believe he is doing his duty, even using that fact as moral or social status. So when I found this out, I'm just so freaking repulsed because you have men nowadays sitting here saying, I'm doing my duty. And then you get into the actual facts behind that statement and you're realizing that they are not fully doing their duty, but they can use the freaking language semantics to say they're doing their duty. It's like minimally, extremely minimally. So like on paper, they're not lying by saying they're doing their duty, but in all reality, they are not even close. So there is nothing more that upsets me. There's nothing that it upsets me more than this because you're talking about children. I'm sorry. It's very upsetting to me. So, but once you zoom out historically, the shift becomes very traceable. This didn't happen because I've had this conversation. I called it out. I had this conversation. I don't understand necessarily the other perspective, but I do want to lay it out because this is real. This is like real, okay? This didn't happen because men suddenly became worse people. It happened because responsibility was decoupled from honor and authority, then redefined as minimum legal compliance instead of moral obligation. So there's a lot of men that are not legally in the court system doing this. Women cannot freaking afford legal representation a lot, especially if they have multiple kids. And so men are using that as leverage financially left and right. It's wild to me. Once that happened, the floor quietly became the ceiling. In earlier generations, responsibility was an identity. Being a husband or father wasn't a technical category. Men are not wanting to be husbands or fathers anymore. They want a wife and kids. There's a huge difference between the two. Wanting a wife and kids is a huge difference. It's a front compared to wanting to be a husband or a father. It was a social role enforced by community, reputation, and consequence. A man couldn't claim status without actually showing up. Absence was noticed. Provision was visible. Other men judged men. Women expected full presence. There was no psychological refuge in doing the bare minimum. You either carried the load or you didn't, and everyone knew which was which. So this is really down low. I mean, down low isn't just a sexual thing. It's a financial thing. It's affronting. It's living double lives. It's saying, oh, yeah, I'm responsible for my wife and children, when in all reality, they're suffering. That is DL. That's down low. Don't get that twisted. That's real. It's real life. It's like down low goes so much deeper than what the internet is talking about, and sexuality is just one tiny little portion of it. It goes more, to me, cheating is cheating. I get that. Like, yeah, it's a thing. But when you're faking your entire freaking life, that is so much deeper and more sinister. It's disgusting. So the shift began in the late 1960s and 1970s. This period did not need correction. Unchecked male authority, economic entrapment of women, and abusive marriages were real. But the correction focused almost entirely on dismantling male power without rebuilding male responsibility in a new coherent form. Authority was removed, responsibility remained, honor was never attached. This was the original fracture. By the 1980s and 1990s, fatherhood became increasingly legalized but not moralized. So, this is the argument that I have circled around over and over and over again. It's real for men, it's real structurally. I am not trying to say that this makes it okay that men use that as an excuse. It's still an excuse. Still an excuse, but we have to understand what they're saying and where they're coming from. So by the 1980s and 1990s, fatherhood became increasingly legalized but not moralized. Courts enforced minimum financial contribution as the primary metric of responsibility. So, I do want to pause for 1 second. I just don't want to go off the rails, but men seem to care more about the relationship than their own children. And once the relationship is over, they're not going to hardly provide for their children. That is so sinister to me. And, a man paying $40 a week in this economy, let alone $200 in this economy, that doesn't even cover food, hardly. Food, housing, clothing. But it's considered I'm doing my part in their mind. Anyways. So what disappeared was communal judgment, peer enforcement, and social shame for absence. What replaced them were numbers, paperwork, and compliance thresholds. Men were taught implicitly but clearly that if they meet the legal minimum, they had met the moral maximum. At the same time, culture shifted toward extreme individualism. Personal fulfillment, autonomy, and freedom were framed as the highest goods. Responsibility was recoded as burden, risk, and loss. Men absorbed this message without being given any replacement structure for meaning. Responsibility stopped being "this is who I am" and became "this is what I owe," unfortunately. That psychological downgrade matters more than people realize. By the 2000s and 2010s, systems governing families became adversarial rather than integrative. Engagement felt like surveillance. Presence felt like leverage against them. Responsibility became permanent liability without corresponding authority or respect. So, this is really deep. I can't remember how far in I got with this, but I'm going to feather this out so deeply because men are I do actually. Okay, let me keep going because men are feeling like they are responsible but have no authority or respect anymore. So that's a huge thing for them. So men adapted not by rising but by minimalizing exposure. That's when minimum compliance strategies exploded. Compliance became identity. So this is how you get the $40 phenomenon. I'm sorry. I can't. I can't. It infuriates me. I'm not going to lie. I'm never going to forget this the rest of my life. I am like traumatized. I am so traumatized by a man saying that he's doing his duty by paying $40 a week for one child. Like, that is traumatizing for me because that is insane. I can't. Once responsibility is reduced to a number, it becomes finite, measurable, and completable. The question stops being, am I a father, and becomes, am I in compliance? He doesn't compare himself to an integrated present man. He compares himself downward to men who disappeared completely. In that degraded reference frame, $40 a week feels morally superior. Claiming I pay support becomes identity protection. Emotional disengagement is not laziness here. It's dissonance avoidance. If he stayed present, he would be confronted with the gap between that number and real life. He would feel insufficiency. Distance protects the illusion. What you're witnessing is not masculinity, it's moral shrink wrapping. Responsibility has been compressed down to the smallest unit required to avoid consequence, then rebranded as virtue. That's why it feels fake, because it is. Responsibility without agency, why this is not about control. So, it's like you get into this, and it's like men want to control outcomes. They want to have authority, and they want to control outcomes. And this is where I headbutt the most, because in my mind, you know, the women are putting in the work of the household, of the children, and the man is supposed to do, the more future forecasting. And I've been unfortunate too. It depends on the man. Like, an integrated man would be very good at all of this. An unintegrated man, you feel like you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and they're supposed to be the captain and no one has their hands on the wheel. Like, that is what's going on. I'm sorry. I'm just like, it's all right. So this is a point where people talk past each other. It can sound like this is about men wanting control, especially since many men are no longer fully providing. So I'm trying to be in their defense. I try to see both perspectives. I love seeing all sides of an argument. So I went deep in this rabbit hole earlier today, and it's a matter of maturity, honestly. So they're thinking they want to control the outcome. But control and agency are not the same thing. Control is dictating outcomes regardless of others. Agency, let me repeat this. Control is dictating outcomes regardless of others. Agency is casual relevance, knowing your effort meaningfully shapes outcomes. Historically, provision created agency, not dominance. So men today, they want control, they want dominance. It's just freaking, men did not control day-to-day child rearing, women always did. What provision gave men was system level relevance. Their presence mattered, their absence had visible cost, and their effort altered the family's trajectory. That's agency. What changed is that provision lost leverage before responsibility disappeared. Many men now experience financial contribution, or do they really? That doesn't change decisions, compliance. That does not change decisions, compliance that doesn't create trust, and presence that doesn't protect their bond. Internally, the math becomes, my effort doesn't steer outcomes. It only exposes me. When humans perceive that, they reduce exposure. That's not hunger for power, it's loss minimization. So if this were about control and a healthy man and an unhealthy man, you would see men leaning in, demanding obedience, dominance, and authority. Instead, we can see withdrawal, avoidance, minimal compliance, and rationalization. Control-seeking people lean in, disengaging people step back. So we are having a lot of disengagement. Culturally, we have a lot of disengagement. Personally, in relationships, you're seeing men not wanting to be married, wanting to have children before marriage, wanting you to move in and have a child before marriage. That is a type of control, okay? Yeah. Even when men do provide now, agency often isn't restored. Contribution is reframed as obligation rather than authorship. Responsibility continues even when influence disappears. Provision becomes liability, not participation. Humans do not invest in systems where cost is guaranteed, but influence is optional. So this is coming from their perspective. From women's perspective, especially mothers, this is enraging because women are carrying the real load while men talk about agency without providing. That anger is justified, but structurally, what happens is a feedback loop. Men disengage first, provision drops farther, women compensate, and men then justify further withdrawal. It is not a single moral failure, it is systemic behavioral failure. When agency collapses, some men shift into extraction mode. Now, this is sinister. This is insane. Men are already like extractive by nature, and it's ramping up. It is ramping up. Men are becoming more extractive than ever of women, and this is terrifying to me. When agency collapses, some men shift into extraction mode. Sex without commitment, validation without responsibility, identity without cost. This looks like entitlement, but internally it's framed as why invest deeply if I'm structurally replaceable? That mindset is corrosive and devastating, but it does not originate from a desire to dominate. So they say. It originates from loss of casual significance. This is such a wild. I'm trying so hard to be so understanding. And it's like, yeah, they want to be significant. They want to be needed. They want to have control of outcomes. Got a hair in my mouth. It just doesn't add up for me. Men are wanting 50-50 relationships while having the same authority. You know, none of this excuses abandoning children or underpaying support. Explaining a mechanism is not justifying harm. But if we misdiagnose the cause as men want control, you'll never fix it because the intervention will be wrong. So it's not just about control or dominance, it's about agency and significance. If you are talking about healthy integrated men, which on scale, there's not many. All right, so why men use women more when times are harder? This is the paradox that feels backwards until you see the logic. Men aren't using women despite hard times. They're using women because they feel weaker inside harder systems. When structural power collapses, some men reach for relational power. In earlier generations, work led to stability, responsibility led to respect, and family led to meaning. Today, work doesn't guarantee security, responsibility doesn't guarantee authority, and family doesn't guarantee protection. So many men conclude, often unconsciously, that long-term investment is risky and short-term extraction is safer. Exactly what's going on. Responsibility has become high risk with low reward. Modern responsibility often, it's like this is their excuse. I swear to you, this is their how they look at this. But I am so upset because it's like women are literally carrying the load, financial load, child load, the lack of peace load. Like, anyways. Modern responsibility often looks like permanent obligation, asymmetric enforcement, high exposure, and little honor. So instead of opting into responsibility, men opt around it. Using women becomes liability avoidance. Weak men don't opt out, they extract. When men don't feel capable of building stable futures, they don't become celibate monks. They become consumers of women through situationships, future faking, and minimal compliance narratives. They borrow stability they cannot generate. This is intensified by the sexual marketplace shift. Women adapted faster to education, autonomy, and financial responsibility. Many men are now less stable and less needed economically. Instead of integrating upward, some game access, charm instead of provision, performance instead of commitment. Down low and split identity behavior is the extreme version of this logic. Secrecy feels efficient, compartmentalization feels safer than integration. Instead of one hard life, they live two easier lives until collapse. This feels worse now because women have less margin than ever. Rent is higher, childcare is brutal. Courts are slow, support systems are thin. So when men extract now, the damage is existential, not just emotional. What actually causes a man to become this way? These men are made, not born. The pattern forms when accountability is optional early. You know, I'm sitting here studying generations. I'm working on the millennial generation now. I'm going to try to finish that. I've been jumping into different series. Generation X, the generation my father was in, the baby boomers. It's like the millennial men. This is really, really rampant in the millennial men. The moral virtue signaling, oh, I'm supporting my child, when you look at the paperwork and it's like, no, you're not. You can say you are, but you're really not. And the millennial men, most of them, their parents were married. I understand that marriage started breaking down during the millennial era, but still, most of their parents are still married. Or at least in their younger childhood, their parents were married. And they grew up in understanding the man and the woman's role. They were taking care of the family equally. What is the deal? And then you get into the institutional collapse during their older, teen years and crossing into 25, 30. It's insane to look at the collapse of the containers: religion, community, marriage, economy, education, being insanely in debt due to getting degrees. This breakdown has happened in the last couple of decades. Imagine what the world's going to be like in another decade. I'm terrified for my children, the younger generations, women, especially girls. Whew, what will the excuse be like then? All right, the pattern forms when accountability is optional early. They had good role models, and now they're just completely taking advantage of the systems and extracting of women. It's just disgusting. The pattern forms when accountability is optional early. Responsibility is framed as loss rather than power, and avoidance repeatedly pays off. Many confuse rules with ethics. Technical compliance replaces internal principle. Without initiation into manhood, adulthood becomes symbolic. Sex does not equal responsibility. Fatherhood does not equal fathering. They externalize regulation onto women, courts, employers, and protect identity at all costs. I'm not a bad guy becomes the North Star. Minimization, defensiveness, and downward comparison preserve self-image. Romance and fatherhood expose this first because you can't hide load avoidance when real people depend on you. The age of extraction: why men with less responsibility are taking more from women. This is a hard topic to talk about. I personally have been living it for the last 16 years almost. My older daughter is turning 16, and I've taken care of her my entire life. Oh, you make bad decisions, you make, a terrible choice on the man that you were with, and it's like men lie about their whole personality just to get with you. And I'm a lot smarter now than I used to be, but it is absolute chaos. Man, it's hot. Whew. This topic makes me hot because I've lived it. And it's very sad, and I think it needs to be spoken on more. All right, so the age of extraction: why men with less responsibility are taking more from women. So I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to understand why men have less responsibility. There's less marriage, there's more sex available, there's porn, there's freaking apps, it's just they're not expected to fully provide. Women are working, women are, doing everything. They're taking care of the kids, the house, the cooking, working. It is absolutely insane. Men are not expected from like they used to be, and yet they're extracting more from women. Why? Why? Why is no one talking about this? We're living in a paradox that's hard to wrap your head around if you're an internally responsible person. Men today as a class have less structural responsibility than previous generations, less expectation to marry, less expectation to provide fully, less community oversight, less shame for abandoning roles, and yet women are being extracted harder than ever. Emotionally, sexually, financially, logistically, even spiritually. And it's not just a few bad men, it's a repeatable pattern in how responsibility has been redefined. What used to be an identity, father, husband, provider, has been reduced to a technical category. What used to be I carry what depends on me has become what is the minimum I can do and still claim I'm decent. That's not confusion. That is not ignorance. It's moral minimization. And yes, they know they're doing it. And yes, they are doing it on purpose. What makes me the most absolutely upset about, that whole $40 a week. Yes, I'm a good father because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing minimally. What makes me extremely upset about that is not only because the child is not being provided for, the man is gaining capital on the women that they are doing that to. They know they are doing it, and they're gaining financially from not actually providing for their children. That pisses me off more than I don't even know what. I'd rather someone cheat on me than understand what this part. Yeah, that deep. I'm getting really emotional. It's just like disgusting behavior. All right, where was I? The reason it feels so fake is because it is. Its responsibility shrunk down to the smallest possible unit that protects a man's self image while transferring the real burden to the woman. The extraction is hidden behind procedural compliance. Moral minimization, how men redefined responsibility into a loophole. A man who pays the legal minimum and calls it doing his duty is not confused about reality. He is outsourcing morality to the system. Instead of asking, what do my children actually need from me? He asks, what is the minimum requirement so I can't be accused of failing? That shift matters because it changes responsibility from something relational and ethical into something procedural. Once morality becomes procedural, the internal bar collapses. As long as he meets the bare external requirement, he can feel morally insulated, even if the mother is drowning and the child is under resourced. He doesn't have to track impact, he only has to track compliance. That's compliance without ownership. This is why minimum payment protects his identity more than his children. Paying $40 a week per child is not provision, it's identity preservation. If he admitted the real cost financially, emotionally, and logistically, even $200 for God's sakes, whatever, he would have to confront how dependent children actually are, how much the mother is carrying, and how fragile the good father narrative really is. So instead, he anchors identity to a technical statement. I pay child support. That becomes a shield, not because it is true in spirit, but because it is true on paper. And this is where the most corrosive distortion happens. He confuses obligation with sacrifice. Integrated men measure responsibility by impact. Avoidant men measure responsibility by inconvenience. If the payment doesn't meaningfully alter his lifestyle, priorities, or comfort, he doesn't experience it as real responsibility. He believes he's contributing because he can still live as if nothing has changed. Meanwhile, the mother absorbs housing, instability, childcare costs, food, healthcare, clothing, time, emotional labor, and career limitation. But because he doesn't feel the pressure, he assumes it does not exist. That isn't low intelligence. It's insulation-driven empathy failure. This is also why verbal masculinity replaces operational masculinity. Saying I'm doing my responsibilities is verbal masculinity. Status language, identity language, and performance language. Actually adjusting your life around children is operational masculinity. Behavior, sacrifice, load bearing decisions. Many men stay stuck in the verbal version because it allows them to avoid financial restructuring, avoid lifestyle reduction, avoid emotional inconvenience, and avoid relational humility. They get the status of responsibility without the weight of responsibility. That is not fatherhood, that's image management. To hold the illusion, they rationalize through comparison instead of reality. Some fathers don't pay anything. I could be worse. I'm not absent. The court said it, not me. These comparisons are downward. They lower the bar until he can step over it comfortably while still avoiding the actual demands of fatherhood. It allows him to feel like he's not the problem while remaining the problem. This is what avoidance looks like after institutional collapse. In previous generations, shame, community oversight, family pressure, and economic visibility made this behavior socially untenable. Today, responsibility is privatized. Fatherhood is bureaucratized, consequences are delayed, and men can disappear into procedural compliance. So he's not just avoiding you or the children, he's avoiding adult male integration in a culture that no longer enforces it. The hard truth is that if his children's quality of life would materially improve with more contribution, and he has that capacity, then claiming I'm doing my duty is self-deception. Real responsibility costs something. If changes were if change it changes where you live, how you spend, what you delay, what you give up. If none of that is happening, then the responsibility is symbolic, not real. And children feel this. Children don't measure fatherhood by dollar amounts. They measure it by presence, reliability, stability, and effort. When a father reduces his role to the legal minimum, children internalize one of two messages: I wasn't worth more, or responsibility is something you avoid if you can. Both are damaging. Phew. This really hits my own internal wound. My mother has been like this her entire life with me. My father is the one that stepped up and stepped in my entire life. And I am that parent. I completely step up for my children entirely. My entire life revolves around my children. And yeah. So it's not just men, it's not just women. Like in my own life, it was my mother. So I can definitely see both perspectives. But this is very frustrating because I keep running into this problem. I just don't understand. All right. That's why this is such a big problem. He will insist he's a good father right up until the moment his children stop believing it. Because in his mind, he's defining responsibility in the smallest possible unit that keeps his self-image intact. This isn't confusion, it's moral minimization. So let's break it down cleanly without psychology jargon. So I'm just going to go through a list. My last, I've learned there's certain things. Down low is a huge thing that I've learned in the past year. Weaponized incompetence, when a man is absolutely in the know of what he's doing wrong, but he still does it, but act like he has no clue. Weaponized incompetence. Down low, weaponized incompetence, and this moral minimization. Yeah. Huge things that women need to understand. And emotional offloading is another huge one, honestly. Men do not want to do their own internal work, so they expect you to do all of it. The emotional, it's just, I can't. All right, that's for a different video. All right, number 1, he has redefined responsibility to mean what I can't be punished for. So this is a list about moral minimization. All right, so number 1, he has redefined responsibility to mean what I can't be punished for. When a man pays the legal minimum and calls it doing his part, what he's actually doing is outsourcing morality to the court system, or not. Sometimes it's not even set up in the court, but just doing the absolute bare minimum. This is a very good example, though. This really led me down a rabbit hole. So instead of asking, what do my children actually need from me, he asked, what is the minimum requirement so I can't be accused of failing? So this is just one example. There are many. So that shift matters. Responsibility stops being relational or ethical and becomes procedural. As long as he meets the bare external requirement, he feels morally insulated. And even if the real burden is falling entirely on someone else, this is not ignorance, it's compliance without ownership. Number 2, I'm going to hammer this in this video because it's like outrageous. Minimum repayment protects his identity, not his children. Paying $40 or whatever the amount a week per child is not about provision. It is about identity preservation. If he admitted the real cost, financially, emotionally, logistically, he would have to confront how much he is not contributing, how much someone else is carrying, how dependent his children actually are on him, and how fragile his good father narrative actually is. So instead, he anchors his identity to a technicality. I pay child support. That sentence becomes a shield, not because it's true in spirit, but because it's true on paper. Number 3, he is confusing obligation with sacrifice. I am such a responsible person. This shit pisses me off. A key difference between integrated men and avoidant men. Integrated men measure responsibility by impact. Avoidant men measure responsibility by inconvenience. If the payment doesn't meaningfully alter his lifestyle, priorities, or comfort, he doesn't experience it as real responsibility. Sheer 7 was right, y'all. Sheer 7 was right. She goes more extreme, but you know what? She proves to be right every single day, because if a man isn't paying for something, he doesn't care. Period. And he's going to try to avoid it. they only care about what they pay for. It's insane. It's insane. And they have to be forced to, like literally, or else they're going to extract. So he believes I'm contributing. Meanwhile, the mother absorbs housing instability, childcare costs explode, food, healthcare, clothing, time, and emotional labor compound. Career mobility shrinks, stress increases. But because he doesn't feel the pressure, he assumes it doesn't exist. This is empathy failure driven by insulation, not lack of intelligence. This is real. They know what they are doing. Number 4, he is avoiding adult masculine accountability while performing it verbally. Saying I'm doing my responsibility is verbal masculinity. Actually adjusting one's life around children is operational masculinity. These are not the same. Many men stay stuck in the verbal version because it allows them to avoid financial restructuring, avoid lifestyle reduction, avoid emotional inconvenience, avoid relational humility. He gets the status of responsibility without the weight of responsibility. That is not fatherhood, that's image management. Number 5, he is likely rationalizing through comparison, not reality. Men who do this often justify themselves by saying things like, some fathers don't pay anything, it could be worse, I'm not absent, the court said it, not me. These comparisons are downward, not truthful. They lower the bar until you can step over it. Number 6, this is what avoidance looks like after institutions collapse. In previous generations, shame, community pressure, family oversight, and economic visibility would have made this behavior socially unattainable. You know, yeah, we live in a whole different world. Today, responsibility is privatized, fatherhood is bureaucratized, consequences are delayed, men can disappear into procedural compliance. So he's not just avoiding you or the children, he's avoiding adult male integration in a culture that no longer enforces it. The hard truth, he's paying to stay comfortable, not to be a father. If his children's quality of life would materially improve with more contribution, and he has the capacity, then claiming I'm doing my responsibilities is self-deception. All right, so I normally do this. I'll write in paragraphs and then I'll make a list. So I did repeat myself quite a bit, but that is I think I'm probably going to upload this as a book as well. Just, some people want to read paragraphs, some people want to read bullet points, and so I do both. I do both. All right. This is like one of the most frustrating topics I've ever talked on, I think, honestly. So how this scales into romantic relationships. The same architecture, different arena. Once you see this pattern in fatherhood, you realize it scales perfectly into romance. What looks like fake responsibility in parenting is the same internal architecture that creates down low behavior, emotional avoidance, and hollow partnerships. The core pattern is simple. He defines responsibility in the smallest possible way that protects his self image. In romance, responsibility gets reduced to bare minimum compliance. In parenting, it's I pay what the court says. In romance, it becomes I didn't cheat, I didn't lie directly, I text back. I showed up sometimes. He confuses technical compliance with relational care. So instead of asking, are you emotionally safe? Are your needs actually met? Is this sustainable? He asks, can you technically say I didn't do anything wrong? That's not partnership, that's liability management. This is why these men outsource conscience to external rules. In parenting, the court becomes the moral authority. In romance, social norms and ambiguity become the shield. You never said that explicitly becomes the defense. You never said that explicitly becomes the defense. Man, I've been through some hard shit. I'm not going to lie. I just, for some reason, I chose two men that knew language, semantics, like, oh my God. I'm an Aquarian mind, so it takes me a little bit more, like a little bit to pick up on that. Jesus. Tricky stuff. Very tricky stuff. You never said that explicitly becomes the defense. He stops tracking impact and starts tracking whether he can be accused. And that is why these men hate clarity. Clarity removes wiggle room, and wiggle room is where extraction hides. He also splits responsibility into my part versus your part. In parenting, it's money is my part, everything else is your part. God, I've lived this so much. It's so hard for me not to go into personal, like, I don't want to be that person. But, this is all lived experience, just so you know. Like, I am literally not, this isn't just research, this is lived real reality for me. In romance, it becomes, I provide X, and I provide X, your emotions are your responsibility. Your insecurity is your problem. Your reaction is the issue. So when you're drowning emotionally, financially, or logistically, he doesn't feel urgency because he already decided the load doesn't belong to him. This is where overfunctioning becomes quiet exploitation. In parenting, you cover the gap so the kids don't suffer. He stays comfortable. In romance, you regulate the emotional field, initiate repair, carry relational memory, and adapt. He interprets your competence as proof that he doesn't need to change. You've got it handled. That sentence is a tell. Then when you name reality, this isn't enough. I'm exhausted. This doesn't feel fair. He experiences it as nagging, control, disrespect, or being used. Because acknowledging your reality would require him to expand his definition of responsibility, and that threatens his identity. To protect the identity, he compares downward. At least I'm not abusive. At least I'm not like other guys. At least I'm honest sometimes. The bar keeps dropping until he clears it effortlessly. Over time, the relationship doesn't necessarily explode, it atrophies. Shallow intimacy, resentment in the woman, emotional deadness, parallel lives, quiet abandonment, and he tells himself it just didn't work out. And this is why it feels so fake. It looks adult on paper, but feels empty in real life. You are reacting not just cruelty, but to moral hollowing. That's why it feels like theft of time, energy, fertility, and trust, because it is. How the minimum responsibility mindset scales into romance. So I'm going to go over the list. He defines responsibility in the smallest possible way that protects his self-image. So that logic doesn't start with kids. It starts in the relationship. Number one, responsibility gets reduced to bare minimum compliance. In parenting, I pay what the court says. In romance, I don't cheat. I don't lie directly. I text back sometimes. I show up sometimes. He confuses technical compliance with relational care. So instead of asking how you are emotionally, this also gets involved with the lack of the feminine integration within men. He asked, can you technically say I didn't do anything wrong? That's not partnership, that's liability management. All right, so I'm not going to go through all this again. I think you got the point. All right, what else? So why this connects with down low behavior. Down low behavior is just this mindset taken to its logical extreme. Minimum truth disclosure, maximum self-protection, outsourced regulation, parallel reality, zero tolerance for questions. It is the same architecture. So most people only see this after years invested, kids involved, finances tangled, and nervous systems wrecked. So this is a pattern level logic, not just the behavior. So early detection, I think we need to just talk about how to protect yourself. Early detection in 60 to 90 days. What women can spot before they get attached. So down low, weaponized incompetence, and moral minimization. 3 things you really, really, really need to understand. In this day and age, in this wonderful day and age that we live in. What women can spot before they get attached. This mindset shows up quickly if you know what you're listening for. You don't need years. You don't need a baby. You don't need a court case. You can often see it under 90 days. I'm going to do a whole video about men wanting women to have a child, move in, all that crap, 50-50. That's going to be probably next. I got like 5 videos I'm getting ready to do, so we're already an hour in. One of the earliest tells is that he defines responsibility after the fact. He doesn't clarify expectations early. He lets ambiguity ride. And when issues arise, he says, I didn't know that mattered to you. So this is honestly very freaking important. Like, at this point in my life, like, if I ever date again, I'm going to have, like, a 100-page book that I hand that man and say, this is what I expect. Like, this is how it's going to be. I'm gonna cover it all. This is our contractual agreement. Here's what it is. Like, that is literally how we literally have to treat this nowadays, because it is so freaking, like, it's a lot harder in today because of finances, because of what's going on. Like, it's just a woman making a mistake today. Yes, we have our freedom. Yes, we're making more money, whatever. It can go both ways. It just depends on who you are. And I'm really talking to women who obviously are not like millionaires. This isn't really an issue for, I mean, it's still an issue for like famous people. Like, this stuff is real. Like, they still get extracted from and like totally ran over. But it isn't as much as an issue for somebody that doesn't have as much backup, like money, family. It's a lot more expensive now to make these mistakes. So that's really who I'm talking to. So, one of the earliest tells is that he defines responsibility after the fact. So, I didn't know that mattered to you. That's not ignorance. That's liability avoidance. He waits to see what you tolerate, then adjusts just enough. Another tell is that he treats effort like a favor, not a baseline. This drives me insane. When any little tiny favor they do for you, they use it for leverage and they want the highest kudos for it. Huge red flag. Another tell is that he treats effort like a favor, not a baseline. You'll hear, I'm trying, I'm doing my best. At least I showed up. Effort becomes currency to silence critique. A man oriented toward care asks, is this actually working for you? A man oriented towards compliance asks, can you acknowledge that I tried? Another tell is that he resents structure but loves benefits. He pushes back on definitions, labels, timelines, and accountability, but happily accepts intimacy, emotional labor, sex, stability, and your time. That predicts minimum responsibility forever. So the dangling the carrot, it's an honor to take. I'm gonna not say that because okay. So I will say, um, he pushes back on definitions, labels, and timelines. So that really deals with the marriage thing, dangling the carrot, agreeing up front that you're going to get married before you have children and move in. And then he pushes that, pushes it. Now all of a sudden you're living with him, totally dependent on him, have no friends, don't even know who you are anymore. Like they will push it there. They will push it there if you let them. All right. So watch how he argues. Does he invoke rules instead of impact? Does he focus on technicalities, semantics, what he didn't do, instead of how it landed and what needs to adjust? That's the same mindset as I paid what the court ordered. So invoking rules instead of impact. Do as I say, not as I do. Turning into extremely controlling, having all these insane rules, not caring about your own actual needs, having high standards and not following his own standards. You have to follow his rules and standards, but my God, he's not going to follow any rules or standards, period. Like, there's just totally destroying your self-worth. Watch out for that. Notice whether he frames your needs as pressure. You're rushing things. Why can't you let it flow? You're overthinking. Translation, your needs increase his load and he doesn't want more load. Yeah. Watch whether he's comfortable letting you overfunction. You plan, follow up, remember, regulate, and he relaxes. That comfort is data. Men who intend to integrate feel urgency when the woman is carrying too much. Men who intend to minimize feel relief. So is he helping you with laundry, the dishes, the day-to-day responsibilities, childcare costs? Is he wanting you to work, pay 50-50 that isn't actually 50-50? Hopefully you're not at that point yet, but and prior to that point, is he asking you, is there anything I can do to help you? That would be a good, just in the beginning, before you're in a relationship, for God's sakes, try to see if this man is going to lighten your load. In the biggest tell, questions irritate him more than problems. You'll feel a tone shift, defensiveness, jokes, and minimization. Men who intend to integrate welcome clarity. Men who intend to minimize fear it. This is why compliance is not care, is the hammer line. Compliance is doing the minimum requirement to avoid consequences. Care is carrying load before it becomes a crisis. If you are constantly explaining, reminding, regulating, or compensating, you are not in a partnership. You are managing a liability. A man who confuses compliance for care will always feel like a ghost partner. Present on paper, absent in weight. Love does not make someone responsible. Responsibility makes love survivable. Why men seem to have less responsibility now. All right, so do I want to read that part? All right, so yeah. So this is where our core question lives. If men have less responsibility now, why are they extracting harder? Because extraction is the replacement for responsibility when maturity is missing. When a man is unwilling to be a builder, he becomes a consumer, and modern culture makes consumption easy. Sex is accessible without containment. Domestic stability is accessible without marriage. Emotional labor is accessible without reciprocity. Fatherhood can be bureaucratized into a payment. Avoidance can be reframed as autonomy. So the man doesn't step up into adulthood, he steps sideways into loopholes. He maintains self image through minimum compliance and extracts benefits through ambiguity. In a high cost world, this becomes catastrophic because women and children have less margin than ever. Minimum no longer means functional. It means survival strain. So number 1, oh Jesus, I just lost it. I just went down like 20 pages. Hold on a second. That was awful. I haven't done that one before. Okay, there we go. Responsibility is not a negotiable tool. It is a baseline condition of adulthood. The first internal shift men would need is this. So, responsibility is not something you take on in exchange for control, praise, loyalty, or compliance. It is something you carry because the rule exists. Internalization looks like if a child exists, I am responsible. If I enter a relationship, I am accountable for its impact. If my actions create dependency, I owe continuity. Not, I will show up if I feel respected. I'll contribute if I get authority. I'll stay if the system feels fair. That mindset is adolescent. Adults don't bargain with gravity. So these are things that men need to learn to mature. We all know that men are like not as mature as women, period. It takes them forever if they ever do. So these are things that need to happen in order for men to grow the hell up. So number 2, agency is not the same as control over outcomes. Agency equals control over conduct. This is where many men get stuck. They confuse agency with deciding how things turn out, having final say, and being irreplaceable. But real agency is choosing how you act regardless of outcome, staying aligned under uncertainty, maintaining integrity when leverage is low. To meet you where you are, a man must internalize, I do not need to steer the whole system to be responsible inside it. Number 3, being needed is not the same as being responsible. So men, they're always wanting to, I need to be needed. And it's like, yeah, well, that's a major psychological gap. Number 4, provision is not just money. It is continuity, presence, and reliability. Men who believe provision equals sending something are still thinking transactionally. To meet you where you are, a man has to internalize that provision is a stabilizing force, not a payment. Real provision means showing up consistently, not episodically. Carrying responsibility even when it's inconvenient. Understanding the absence creates labor for someone else. Recognizing that money without presence still transfers burden. A man paying the legal minimum while disengaging emotionally is not providing. He is outsourcing the real cost to the woman, the child, and the future. Number 5, compliance is not care. Whew. I'm just so frustrated. A man saying, I'm doing what the system requires, is not expressing care. He's expressing minimal compliance. So to meet you, a man must internalize. Speaking to all the women that have suffered and dealt with this, you're not the only one. To meet you, a man must internalize. Care is proactive, not reactive. Proactive. Care is proactive, not reactive. A man must already have housing set up, must already have a stable job. Just caring about your health care, if you're wanting a child, especially, it's proactive, not reactive. Having a man, I'm so frustrated because how can you not understand? Men treat women nowadays like a freaking car. They're gonna drive the car around to see if they actually want to buy it, and it's like, but they use the car for like 5 years and then change their mind and don't actually pay for it. I'm so frustrated with this mentality. All right. This is the hardest topic, I think, actually, that I've talked on. Responsibility accepts needs instead of dodging them. Legality is not morality. Minimum effort does not equal integrity. So you operate from, what does a situation actually require of me? Most women do. Many men operate from, what can I get away with and still feel justified? That gap is not personality, it's maturity. Parenthood is a permanent role, not a conditional one. This is the hardest of the truths for many men to accept, and one of the clearest lines. To meet you, a woman, I'm assuming I'm talking to women in this video. To meet you, a man must internalize fatherhood does not dissolve because the relationship ends. And if you're a man watching this, I'm extremely proud of you. Not gonna lie. To meet you, a man must internalize fatherhood does not dissolve because the relationship ends. Responsibility does not scale down because feelings change. Children are not extensions of adult conflict. A man who believes my obligation depends on my relationship with the mother is still centering himself. Fairness is not the metric, impact is. Many men justify disengagement by saying, the system isn't fair, I don't get a say, I'm treated like an ATM. You're operating from a different axis entirely. Women. What happens if I don't act? Who pays the price? What breaks if I walk away? To meet you, a man would have to internalize. Responsibility is measured by downstream impact, not personal satisfaction. Fairness arguments are often just emotional escape hatches. Blaming the system. I'm really breaking down what is going on with all of the pillars of society breaking down. It's important to understand that, but we also can't blame it for not being a actual good moral human being. Jesus. Number 8, strength is the ability to carry asymmetry without collapse. For a man, he must internalize that adulthood is asymmetrical. Sometimes you carry more than you receive. Sometimes no one thanks you. Sometimes the system doesn't reward you. That is not oppression. That is reality. Strength is not being protected from imbalance. Strength is staying upright inside of it. Masculinity without extraction. Masculinity must stop being about extracting sex, labor, admiration, and forgiveness. Feeling powerful without being accountable. Asserting identity while avoiding duty. And start being about stabilizing environments, reducing chaos, increasing safety for dependents, and absorbing stress so others don't have to. That is real masculinity. Not dominance, not image, not rhetoric. So the final internalization, care is not optional. It is who you are. You do not ask, is it worth it? Do I feel appreciated? Am I getting enough back? You ask, is this my responsibility? Does someone depend on me? What happens if I don't act? Men need to internalize that care is not conditional. It is identity. All right, so I was going to talk more about compliance is not care. Let me scan this over. All right, so yeah, I am now starting to close, so yay. I need to get a little bit more comfy. Oh. All All right, so compliance is not care. Minimum payment is not fatherhood. Technical non-abuse is not love. Optics are not responsibility. The point isn't to hate men. The point is to name what is happening so women can stop paying for it with their bodies, time, finances, and children. If a man's responsibility does not change his comfort, it is usually not real responsibility. If a man's decency is always framed as a favor, it's usually leverage. If a man cannot tolerate clarity, he is not ready for partnership. And if a man demands you absorb irreversible risk before he offers formal protection, that is not caution, that is reallocation. Women with limited margin cannot date for potential. They must date for demonstrated load bearing capacity because in today's climate, being wrong is expensive. So I want to end this cleanly without moral theater and without apology. I've been apologizing the whole time. I try to keep it non-personal and just educational, but it is what it is. Compliance is not care. Minimum payment is not fatherhood. Technical non-abuse is not love. All right, so yeah, I accidentally put that in there. Yeah, okay. So, all right, a man paying $40 a week and calling it duty is not confused. He is responding perfectly to a system that taught him do the minimum, avoid the rest, claim the badge anyway. The tragedy isn't that he believes it. The tragedy is that nothing around him forces him to believe otherwise anymore. And until responsibility is reattached to agency, honor, and consequence without rolling back woman's autonomy, this pattern will continue. Women aren't overreacting, they're responding to reality under load. All right, so I think I'm done. I'm going to cap it here. I've got about 5 more videos I want to make. So, yeah, add moral minimization to your list with down low and weaponized incompetence. There are many, but yeah, it's a real freaking problem. And I'm not saying all men are terrible, obviously, but this is very extremely tragic, very tragic. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to check out my books. Please like and subscribe. I don't know why I say that at the end of an hour-and-a-half video. I do it every time. I should probably do it in the beginning. Feel free to leave your comments, thoughts, and feelings. Please keep this conversation mature. This will probably be a more triggering video for the men, but, you know, I'm really talking to women in this one. So anyways, I love y'all. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.